The trade rout between South Korea and Japan set to deepen further. That's amid reports Japan is preparing to expand its export restrictions to South Korea beyond just high-tech materials. To do that, Tokyo would exclude Seoul from its whitelist of countries with whom it sets minimal trade limits, and it's citing national security concerns as grounds for the move. And for more insight into the ramifications of Japan and South Korea's row, we're talking to Waqas Adenwala here in studio, and Waqas is the Asia analyst for the Economist Intelligence Unit.
Nice of you to come in with us, Waqas. I just wanted to find out from you, this Japan taking South Korea off this whitelist, in essence, on a working level, what does this mean?
So, well, to break it down, let's talk about what a whitelist really is. It's just a list of countries that Japan has and it does trust. So if you're on that list, it assumes that, you have good export regulations on your own home ground, and basically it can expedite Japanese exports to that particular said country with fewer restrictions. So it's essentially just a Japanese term for that list.
Okay, so, in any trade war, any trade row, everybody wants to know who's going to hurt the most, who's going to, so in this case, will Japan hurt more or will South Korea hurt more?
This is a scenario of mutually assured destruction. So in the short term, South Korea is going to be hurt more for sure because it affects the semiconductor industry. Samsung, SK Hynix are one of the largest producers. They are combined production of South Korean companies together is the largest of semiconductors across the world. They are going to be hurt more because the suppliers that come for this production itself are getting affected. But in the future, South Korea is going to ramp up its R&D, it's going to try to diversify its supplying routes, and Japanese consumers are obviously, importing those semiconductors into the manufacturing of Sony or other Japanese companies as well. So Japanese producers which are supplying this initial high-tech components are losing out on their clients such as SK Hynix, Samsung. The ones which produce electronics in Japan are going to lose out because, the supply chain itself is going to get delayed.
All right, before we even begin to talk about solutions, we really need to know what's at the core, right? And the issues that have been raised have been, South Korea says it's about wartime labor. Japan says it's about their security. Where does the truth lie?
Well, technically, yes, South Korea is right. Japan is just frustrated by the, various goalposts that, Korea has been extending from the historical grievances. So, yes, it's wartime labor for the time being, but South Korean government in general for the past few decades, they have been frustrated by Japanese historical interventions through, multiple centuries of invasions, but also the unresolved issue of comfort women, for instance, territorial disputes, other things such as even the WTO ruling, when Fukushima disaster happened, Japan exports a lot of seafood to various countries. WTO said, South Korea said they won't import any of those. Japan went to WTO. Obviously, once South Korea got an appeal, it got repealed. So there are multiple back and forths. And wartime labor is the latest incident after the radar fire locking incident. So that was a military standoff too. Wartime labor is something that South Korea says is a bilateral, not a bilateral thing, but a one-to-one thing. So the victims, the forced laborers, are actually filing lawsuits against the individual companies. Japan says, oh, sorry, as a government, we actually made all reparations, all arrangements, as the government of Japan towards the Republic of Korea.
Okay, so saying all that, then, how can the two sides now then work towards de-escalating this increasing, expanding tension that, we're seeing between the two countries?
Easy thing would be to just sit down and chat, but easier said than done, because both governments have a populist stance. Abe is facing elections next week. So once that gets out of the way, maybe there's some hope. But until next week, tensions will remain relatively high. But South Korea has elections next year. So Moon Jae-in cannot appear to be weak either. And he has a very strong conservative opponent, team after Park Geun-hye fell down, yes, but he still has not got a majority in the parliament either. He has to appear strong as well.
Yeah, so certainly political undertones to all this. But, they did sit down on a working level last week. But it seems that South Korea is adamant that it wants the WTO to step in at this point. And as you mentioned earlier, it didn't go so well the last time around.
Oh, it didn't, yes. So, yes, there are precedents about that too. But if you even go to the WTO and the WTO does manage to come up with a solution, the problem of the short-term delay, the short-term pain for South Korea is going to remain. That won't get solved. And any decision from WTO can be, open for debate. Japan can go for another round of repealing those decisions by filing another lawsuit or lodging more protests at the WTO. It won't be very fun to watch for the two countries.
So Asia is already feeling the effect of the US-China trade war. Now we have Japan, South Korea. What does this all mean and how will it affect, the rest of Asia then?
In general, it's not a good sign. Obviously, we saw GDP numbers from China today. Singapore had GDP on Friday. Not great numbers either. Any trade war, whether it's monetary like the US-China one or non-monetary with barriers such as the ones that Japan is imposing, they're not great for the world economy in general. Countries lose competitive advantages. But it's always a mixed bag. There are always some winners like Vietnam out of the US-China trade war. With this, you can always expect Taiwanese semiconductor companies like TSMC to be able to boost up their production, or even Chinese, because China is having a Made in China program for 2025. They are trying to diversify away from importing just South Korean semiconductors and producing more at home as well. So it is going to be a mixed bag. The ones that are going to get hurt are definitely Japanese and South Koreans, but others might be able to benefit in the medium to long term.
What about Singapore?
Singapore obviously is a transshipment hub, so it loses out by any trade war, any trade barrier.
What about the dispute? How is it going to affect the tech sector globally then?
Tech sector definitely is not going to do well because a lot of these semiconductor devices that South Korea exports, they go to various global markets. Apple, for instance, is going to be affected. They import a lot from South Korea. HTC in Taiwan, they import a lot. Obviously, a lot of Chinese producers, they import a lot of semiconductor devices from South Korea too. And a lot of Japanese ones too, like I mentioned earlier, Sony. So a lot of these companies are going to face extreme delays or minor delays, if not more. So new regulations state that the delays could go up to 90 days in the products that go from Japan to South Korea. So that's the sort of delay you're looking at, the minimum at least.
Right, so indeed not a fun thing to be happening for this period. But thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us. We're speaking to Waqas Adenwala, Asia analyst for the Economist Intelligence Unit.